Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my December wrap up. Now I have to say, the second half of December was a huge fail for me reading wise. I went a whole week where I only read 150 pages of Christmas week. Don't regret it because I had a great time. Also, the majority of the books, I think all of the books that I've read in December, I really enjoyed anyway. But yeah, I wasn't reading much in the second half of the month. And then on New Year's Eve, literally didn't read a page. So I only have 2 books to share with you guys today. However, I have already done a mid-month wrap up. So if you would like to see reviews of these 2 books, which is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, Are These My Bazoomas I See Before Me by Louise Renison, as well as Deadly Dreams by KJ Sutton, and also Verity by Colleen Hoover, then I will put a link up here to my mid-month wrap-up so you guys can check out my thoughts on those. But getting into my stats for the month, in the month of December, I read 2,744 pages, which breaks down to an average of 88 pages per day. Now, it is worth noting here that when I do these monthly stats, these pages are only in completed books. I did start 2 other books in the second half of December, one of which I am a considerable amount of the way through, so I did actually read more pages than this, but in terms of completed books, it just wasn't there. This is my second worst reading month of the year. There is only one other month where I have failed to hit 3,000 pages. For the star ratings, we had 1 3-star, 2 4-stars, and 3 5-star reads, which breaks down to an average of a 4.33 rating per book. For the demographics, I read 3 young adult books, 2 new adult, and 1 adult. For the formats, we had 3 standardly formatted novels, 2 ebooks, and 1 audiobook. For the genres, I read 3 fantasy, 1 contemporary, 1 science fiction, and 1 thriller. And for the places where I sourced these books from, 3 of them were books I have hauled in 2020, 2 of them were from my own TBR that existed prior to the start of 2020, and 1 of them I read as an audiobook on Scribd. So getting into the books, the first book that I read in the second half of the month was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This was my Inner Circle Patreon pick for November. I ended up starting it late and then it took me a while to get through this one, but this is the first book in one of Sanderson's young adult sci-fi series. In this one, we are following a young girl called Spencer who wants to be a fighter pilot. However, her father was a fighter pilot and he is known as a traitor and a coward, as during a pivotal battle in this ongoing war that Spencer's people are fighting, he turned and fled from the fight. Because of this, Spencer has been living in the shadow of her father her entire life. She is known as the coward's daughter. Her family are not allowed to have real jobs because her father was a coward, and the people who are in power are doing everything they can to stop Spencer from attending this military flight school. So it took me a long time to get through this. I was enjoying it when I was picking it up, but I wasn't like really invested in the story at the beginning. I didn't like Spencer as a main character throughout the beginning of this. I mentioned this in my vlogs and I said I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt because character growth is a thing, but she is very aggressive throughout the start of this, and I do kind of understand where she is coming from. However, I feel like I expect a character in her position to be more defensive. She does lack social skills because she's pretty much never had any friends because of her father being a coward, but she is very outwardly aggressive and argumentative with pretty much everyone that she meets. She also really loves old stories like Earth legends and Earth myths, and she has this really funny habit which I did enjoy for most of the time. It was a little bit overdone, but she will say really bizarre, really dramatic statements. Like, she'll be in an argument and she'll say that she wants to rip somebody's head off and drink blood from their skull and things like that. But by the time we got to the end of this novel, I did really like Spencer. Like I said, benefit of the doubt, character growth. I really enjoyed the plots in here as well. I really like stories that take place in some kind of like fantastical school. I like anything that's like a magic school, an assassin school, a military flight academy school, and I really like the bonds that were created through this setting. I adore, I think, all of the characters in this book. I think some of my particular favorites are Cobb, because I always love a father figure character, and also Doomslug and Mbot. I was really surprised actually with how long this took me to read, because I was kind of feeling it and then not feeling it. By the time I got to the end, I think the last 50 to 80 pages, I teared up at multiple points throughout this. It really really hit my emotions. This book contains a trope that I absolutely adore. It is my favorite trope of all time. I cannot tell you what that trope is because the trope in itself is inherently spoilery, but I will put a link to my favorite tropes video up here if you guys would like to check it out and aren't bothered about finding out what that is. And this book also puts a spin on that trope, which I really wish I could explain to you because I really liked how it was done, but once again, spoilers. Brandon Sanderson did in this book what he always does, which I honestly think is genius. It is so simple, but it is so effective. In every book of Sanderson's that I've read that is part of a series, you will have the resolution of the plot. So you have like your main conflict, everything starts to come together, you get a few chapters after the resolution of the conflict, and then Sanderson will spend a chapter or two setting up for the next book. He withholds information from you for all of the story, so you're going through the narrative with so many questions, and then you get to these last couple of chapters and he will give you a piece of information that you have been dying to know throughout the entirety of the book, as well as setting up the characters and the plot for the next installment, so you are just desperate to read the sequel by the time you get to the end. But overall, even though I struggled to get through this a little bit, I thought that the plot was very compelling. I loved the characters, made me emotional. I'm desperate to read the sequel, and I gave this one 4 stars. And the final book that I read in the month is one that I hate talking about because I just can't really think of anything to say about it, because that was Our Dart Duet by V. Schwab. This is the second book in the Monsters of Verity duology. This is a young adult fantasy duology that takes place in this urban world. It's kind of almost a futuristic fantasy where the city of Verity has been overrun by monsters, and these monsters are created by violent acts. So if somebody murders somebody, a monster will be born from that crime. In this series, we have 2 main characters, Kate and August, and the city of Verity is bisected between the north and the south. Kate is a Harker, and the Harkers run the north, and they charge their citizens for protection. August is a Flynn and also a monster, and he is part of the Flynn family that run the south, and they are more into justice and actively going out and fighting the monsters to try and control their population. So after the events of the first book, this one took a dark turn, a darker turn than I was expecting, and I really enjoyed that about this. I have to say, character-wise, I don't love Kate. I mean, I like her, but I wasn't particularly attached to her or anything. I didn't find her perspective particularly compelling. And August, I do like him, but once again, I'm not overly attached to him. I do think that the side characters in this series are much more compelling and much more interesting than the main characters. The main complaint that I had with the first book is that I felt like there was room for a lot of complexity and growth within the side characters, especially the characters of Ilsa and Leo. And we have a character introduced in here called Sorrow as well, who once again is like Leo and Ilsa, in that I feel like they could have a lot more complexity and depth if they were actually explored in a lot more detail. We do have a lot of themes of grey morality in this series. I've always had this series described to me as Kate being a human but quite monstrous, and August being a monster but having a lot of humanity, and that definitely carries through into the second book where the themes are getting a little bit darker, so the morality is a little bit more grey. And I love morally grey stories. Morally grey characters are my favourites. I think the majority of my favourite characters are morally grey. I also really liked the setting of this, the world and all of the monsters. I enjoyed the magic system, if you will, of how these monsters were created and how different violent crimes manifested. We also had an opening of the world in this installment where we got a glimpse at another city, which once again is another aspect that I would like to have seen explored more, because it was present throughout the beginning of this book and then it just kind of tailed off. We were introduced to new characters that we never touched upon again. And I know V. Schwab does have the tendency, especially with like the villains duology, there is eventually going to be a 3rd installment in that. So I don't know if this series is the same kind of thing where V. Schwab intends to maybe go back to that other location and explore their situation and those characters in further detail. But I did think that it was very kind of counterproductive to introduce us to these characters just for them to be left and forgotten by the time we got to the midpoint of the novel. The writing style in here was fine. I didn't love it. Most of the time V. Schwab has a very basic, simplistic kind of writing style. It is a little bit atmospheric, but I wouldn't describe it as flowery or overly poetical or overly descriptive or anything like that, which is one of my preferred forms of writing styles. So the writing in here, I think it was solidly good. It's not my preferred style, but I didn't hate it. It was fine. But I gave this book 3 stars. Everything that I've described pretty much I really enjoy. Morally grey characters. the setting. I really liked the concept and the bones of the plot, like the plot progression and everything. I think, and I don't even know if this is true, because these books, this one is 470 pages, so nearly 500 pages, but I just feel like there was so much room for development and complexity that wasn't explored in this series, and that is why I'm so ambivalent towards it. When I finished this book, I could not for the life of me fathom why I'm not interested, why I'm not invested. So I think my parting words on this series, I guess, is that if you are interested in it, then read it, because I can't really say anything negative about it, because while I personally want more from it, I do tend to read really big, really complex, expansive fantasy books. So for somebody else who likes more of a fast-paced read, isn't bothered as much about all of the character development and all of the like in-depth world building, may really enjoy this. But I just really think that this duology was not for me. But I am utterly baffled about why I am so ambivalent about this series and this book. I did enjoy this more than The Savage Song, but yeah, it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me, and I cannot for the life of me figure out exactly what it is that makes me so ambivalent about this series. So there you have it. Those are the 2 books that I read in the second half of December. Please let me know down in the comments whether you have read either of these books and what you thought of them. Please also let me know your thoughts on the Monsters of Verity duology, to see if I can maybe pinpoint a little bit more what it is about it that I don't like, or tell me what you loved about it if you really enjoy the series. And also, while December is the last month of the year, please let me know down in the comments whether you guys completed your Goodreads goal. I did. I read 6 books, I think, more than my Goodreads goal, and I am looking forward to lots more reading in 2021. But that's about it for this video, guys, so please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're a go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.